Now, in other news, Britain's former Prime Minister Gordon Brown has not been able to retire quietly to write his memoirs. As the UN Special Envoy for Education, he has his work cut out for him. There are more than 60 million children not in school right now, and he aims to get them all into classrooms by 2015. I met up with him at the World Economic Forum in Davos last week. Gordon Brown, welcome to Arise Television.
A pleasure.
Your new role, UN Global Envoy for Education. Must be a tough challenge.
Well, there are 61 million children who are not going to school. It's outrageous in the year 2013 that so many children will never go to school. Many of them are working full-time. Some are girls who've been married at 10, 11, 12. Some of the victims, like Malala Yousafzai in Pakistan, of discrimination against girls. Some just have no teachers that are there to teach them. And we've got to ensure, as the first chance that a child has, that they've got the benefit of a basic education. And so over the next 2.5 years, until we get to 2015, our aim is to persuade as many countries as possible who are off track to invest in primary education, to get the kids to school, and then of course to get them into decent learning, into secondary education, of course some going on to tertiary education. There's no country is going to succeed in the modern world. No country is going to make the leap from being a low-income country to a high-income country unless it has educated people. And it's a message not just for the individual, but it's for the country itself.
Absolutely. You mentioned 2015, sir, and Millennium Development Goals. And let's put Asia aside and concentrate on Africa. Obviously, some countries are not going to make those goals. They're not going to make it.
Not as things stand. But why I've taken this job is I want to change that. So take Nigeria, 10 million children not at school. Now don't tell me there's not a scientific or technological or medical reason why we can't get these children to school. We need the will to do it. In some cases we will need money. In some cases we'll need to train the teachers. In some cases we'll need to build more schools. But this is something that is eminently possible if there is the will to do it. And go around Africa, and of course there are children in conflict, and we need to do more to help children maintain their education when there's uncertainty and instability. But in most cases, if we invested a little money, trained the teachers or retrained the teachers and built the classrooms, we could get these children into school.
With populations in Africa, for the most part, they say 2/3 of Africa is 18 to 25, 3/4
Absolutely.
is 18 to 40 maybe. And a lot of them uneducated.
But that's the additional reason why we should do it, because in time 20 to 25% of the world's young people will be in Africa. They need to be educated. If you leave the countries illiterate, then they cannot progress economically. So the individual loses, the family loses, and then the country loses. And so because population is rising in Africa, and because Africa is potentially a source of a workforce for the world, making goods, making services, delivering some of the products that people want to buy, we need now to educate children so that they can get the benefit of these jobs. I think that in Africa, we can do a huge amount very quickly. I've been in schools in Africa, and I've talked to pupils and I've talked to parents. I was in South Sudan only a few months ago, and the mothers there who'd come out of North Sudan into South Sudan, who were afraid because of conflict, who had no shelter, had very little food, the first thing they wanted for their children was education. And we had these small schools that were really prefabricated, one hut buildings. And in this village I was in, only 20 children could be educated in that classroom. And outside, as I was in the classroom, looking through a portal, were maybe 40 or 50 children who saw that they couldn't get an education that they wanted, were looking from the outside in. And we have to respond to that demand that these children have for a basic right to education, what their mothers want, what they want, and it's not an impossible demand, it's something we can deliver.
There's this talk that this is Africa's moment. Africa has to seize the moment, carpe diem almost. Is this the time? Do we have to take the bull by the horns this time around, and we can't afford to drop this ball?
I think in the 1990s and at the beginning of the 21st century, the Millennium Development Goals, the Make Poverty History campaign, the Plan for Africa, the Commission of Africa, the setting up of the different organizations, NEPAD and so on, and I was involved in all these things. It created a new interest around the world in working with Africa to change things. And I think we saw young, dynamic leaders moving forward. I think we saw women coming to the forefront in Africa in the way we haven't had before and challenging some of the old patriarchal assumptions. And now I think we've got to move to the next step. And the next stage, if you like, is that we invest in the future of Africa. And that means education. And if you don't have an educated population, there is no way that you're going to be able to have the prosperity that you want. But if you have an educated population with the numbers of young people who are capable of adding their skills to the world's workforce and making the products people want to buy, then it's a huge opportunity. And that's where Africa can move forward, make the next step forward, reform, modernize the education system, invest in it for the future, attract industry into Africa, get the trade routes moving by contact between the different countries of Africa, because there's so little internal trade in Africa. And I think this is therefore the moment, if we do the right things.